Happy New Year, Cecil County and the world, and welcome to 2023 on Cecil TV. Tonight we have the pleasure of having Mr. Walking History himself, despite his youthful good looks, Mike Dixon. Welcome, Mike.
Thanks for having me back, Rob.
It's great, always great to have you on Cecil TV. I always learn something every time you come on, and I'm sure others do too, because you're still teaching, right?
Oh yeah, I'm still teaching, and it's great that I'm able to share a little bit with you, and great that you have us on too.
Now, you're teaching downstate?
Oh, I teach at Wilmington University. I teach history there, and that can involve a range of courses, yeah.
And you maintain your relationship with the Cecil, as the Cecil County historian?
I'm the historian, and so I do research and help people with whatever kind of complex problems they come along with there.
Well, I know you sent me some stuff over the computer. And
did something catch your interest?
Yeah, well, yeah, actually, I see these little stone markers everywhere with where the Mason Dixon line is, or was. It still is, right?
Oh yeah, it's still
What's that Mason Dixon line about, and why is it so important?
Well, you probably cross that Mason Dixon line at least a couple of times a week, especially if you're going to Oxford or Delaware. What that was, Rob, if you go back to 1760s and before, it was unclear where the boundary line for Pennsylvania and Maryland were. So these royal proprietors, the Calverts in Maryland and the Penns in Pennsylvania, they have this great big argument about, like the Penns claimed they own our Calvert that's right up the road from the studio. And the Calverts said, no, we've got land all the way up to Philadelphia and stuff like that. That thing went on for 70, 80 years. Finally, King George got tired of the arguing and bickering. He's got another problem come on called the Revolution. It's getting a little more tense that he's got to settle. And he orders them to divide the territory. So they divide the Delmarva Peninsula. Delaware was part of Pennsylvania in those days. And Pennsylvania got the Delaware side, known as Pennsylvania. We got the Maryland side. And here in Cecil County, we got two of our borders. So right above Calvert, every time you go up to Oxford, anywhere from in here, you're going into cross the Mason-Dixon line. And if you go to Newark, Delaware, or Middletown, you're crossing the Mason-Dixon line. So the issue was settled, and that was the 1760s. Very important argument.
So there weren't any wars over the Mason-Dixon line, then no problems. But there were little problems later in our history, like such as you told me during Prohibition.
Yeah. So the two guys that surveyed the line, Mason and Dixon, they thought they were done with it. They were mathematicians and land surveyors, and they were from Great Britain, and they were like the best of the time. And when they packed up and left here at the end of their 3 years in the country, they thought they were done with it. It was an unsettled dispute. But that line takes on more meanings, even sort of today in the modern time. It has meaning. So like when the Civil War came, it's sort of a dividing line between enslaved states and free soil states. So really important and really tense there. But I can still bring it down more to the modern age. Booze on the line. The booze got to...
It's past 5 o'clock, Mark.
Are we ready?
Yeah. Talk about it.
Yeah. So we get, for instance, so we get the Civil War out of the way. You think that would be done with. The next thing that happens, Prohibition comes. In 1920, Rob, we passed an 18th Amendment that for 14 years made anybody who was buying, selling, transporting alcohol, they were violating the law. Well, that's a 14-year experiment. The guy came around to the bar down in Elkton and says, "Drink up, Charlie. At midnight, we got to close. What are you closing early for?" "Oh, haven't you heard? Prohibition's the law of the land," and it became illegal. Well, entrepreneurs stepped in. And in these remote areas all across Maryland, nearby Pennsylvania, they'd set up stills, work out in the woods where the sheriff couldn't get them. And so there became an enormous off the market, non-legal production. Mostly our law enforcement here in Cecil County wasn't too interested in it, but we got a Sheriff Logan, newly elected sheriff, and he decides he's going to crack down on these rum runners and still operators and stuff. And so one night they went up north of Rising Sun. It's like up where that scout camp is, up in Ridge Road, that area.
Ridge Road, no, well,
Ridge Road.
Yeah.
Oh, you've been hanging out up there, huh? And they found a still operator up there. Well, they arrested him. He had a revenue with him. This guy knew what he was doing, got himself a good lawyer. They go into court, And the guy says, you can't arrest me in Maryland because I was working in Pennsylvania. They said, no, you weren't. Where? So he says, I think you should get a new survey of the Mason Dixon line done. So they surveyed the line. Sure enough, he was in Pennsylvania. So the Cecil County Sheriff's Office was outside of their jurisdiction.
Right.
And so at least it got thrown out of Maryland court. Now, he didn't get off. They ended up taking him into federal court because it was a federal law. But see, you can hide along that line, and you could violate crimes over in Pennsylvania, over in Chester County. Well, the Maryland sheriffs technically couldn't bother you, the Maryland lawmen. So it was a great place. Or same thing, if the Pennsylvania State Police came down, just hop over into Maryland, and you could do your operation.
But they still had to sit on one side of the line or the other.
And they ended up, they even had to pay for a new survey of the Mason-Dixon line as they litigated it. And it was above the Pennsylvania State Mason-Dixon line, or in Pennsylvania.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So they were safe.
So they were safe for the moment, yeah.
How about that?
Of course, that doesn't end it all. You come down to the, let's see, like 1960s. You remember Sheriff DeWitt, don't you?
Jack DeWitt.
Yeah.
No, I met him actually.
Did you meet him?
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, he's a memorable sheriff, I would say. Would you not agree with that?
Yes.
Well, he and there was another man, Sheriff Mogul. They kept getting calls from the liquor stores along the line here in Maryland, just, you know, when you come down 222 or 279 or wherever along through there. And why they were calling the sheriff, and this was like 1960s, 1970s stories, Rob. So why they were calling the sheriff was there were Pennsylvania law enforcement types sitting outside with binoculars spying on the store.
Oh.
And you know what they were doing?
Like down there, 279 at Liquor World or whatever, right outside of Northeast. They were, I guess, I'll bet you they were waiting for people coming down from PA to buy booze.
Exactly. Well, that was disrupting business because they'd see those PA tags, they'd see you putting a case in the car, and as soon as they'd radio back up here in Oxford, and as soon as you crossed, the police would be waiting for you, the Liquor Control Board people, and arrest you. Well, they said to Sheriff Mogul first for his 4 years, and then Sheriff DeWitt. Well, guess what those guys did? They took care of their residents. They went down and arrested the Pennsylvania law enforcement types, put them in the Cecil County Jail.
How about that?
Have you ever been in the old Elkton Jail?
Oh no,
we're not
I
supposed
heard
to talk.
about it.
Oh,
I heard
that's
about
right.
it.
We're not supposed to talk. Well, they would lock them up in the jail. Now think of the trouble this causes. Here you got Cecil County law enforcement locking up Pennsylvania law enforcement. Governor Marvin Mandel gets a call from the governor of Pennsylvania. What are you doing, locking up our law enforcement? Mogul and DeWitt, Sheriff DeWitt said, yeah, they don't have any jurisdiction over here. They were disrupting, upsetting our people, spying on them, locked them up. That thing becomes the most convoluted story. They really had themselves up. It went on for about 6-7 years.
Wow.
And it involves governors, it involves all sorts of trouble. Jack said he was going to create a posse just to patrol the road to look out for Liquor Control Board agents and Pennsylvania law enforcement coming over. They were so pleased with what those guys, and it disrupted that surveillance system. The residents of Conowingo gave Sheriff Mogul a gold badge with diamonds in it when he retired. So that old line still got a lot of symbolism. You know, it came from a dividing line for important land. It took us through the Civil War when it had even enormous meaning, and we've had a lot of little booze wars along the line.
Yeah, and as I recall hearing about Sheriff DeWitt, I think he crossed over the line at one time after Norman Johnston. That's another story, Mike.
He sure did, though. Yes, that's a good story.
Well, I'll tell you what.
What's that?
I read a story in the Cecil Whig. I don't know if our viewers can see it, about steamed ships in Cecil County.
Yeah.
I'm hoping maybe we can get together sometime and talk about that. And you're a good friend of mine, Beth Bold-Moore, wrote for our friends in the Whig about steamships, and this is Elkton.
That is Elkton.
I can't imagine a big ship coming into Elkton nowadays.
Oh, let's talk about it in the next month or so, shall we?
That'd be
a
great.
good subject, yeah.
Happy New Year, viewers, and welcome back, Mike Dixon. We'll see you again real soon.
Thanks, Rob. Thank you.